Hi, welcome to the fourth lesson in indices. This time we're going to be looking at Indice rule number 4. And Indice rule number 4 allows us to turn surds into fractional indices. So here's some examples of converting surds into indices. Let's start with a simple one that we know well. Let's look at the square root of x. Now if we want to write that out in full, we would have to write it's the second root of x to the power 1. Now as the rule suggests above, anything that appears in front of the root symbol ends up as a denominator in the fraction of the indice. So in this case here, because the 2's in front of the root sign, it's going to end up going to the bottom of the fraction, and the number next to the x is going to end up at the top. So in this case, it's going to turn out to x to the power of a half. This one here is the square root of y cubed. So if we write that in full, we're going to have the second root of y to the power 3. Now once again, the number in front of the root symbol ends up as the denominator of the fraction, so what we would end up with is we'd end up with y to the power of 3 over 2. And hopefully you can see in both of these examples, because it was a 2 in front of the root, they've ended up as the bottom part of the fraction. So let's take a wee look at one that's slightly different. Here we have the cubic root of a, or the third root of a to the power 1. So this time, if we follow the same rules, we're not going to have a 2 in the bottom, because the number in front of the symbol that's the root sign is a 3, so therefore this time it gives us a to the power of 1/3. That's a 3 that's down the bottom this time. And in this one here, we have a 5 in front of the root sign, so that's the fifth root of b cubed. So this time the number that has to be in the denominator has to be the 5, so we'd end up with b to the power of 3/5. It's a fairly straightforward rule to follow, so what we'd like to try now is pause the tape and try these examples for yourself. Okay, question number 1. What we've got written out there is the longhand version of the square root of x to the power 5. So the number in front of the root symbol ends up as the denominator of the fractional indice, so this time this turns into x to the power 5 over 2. The number in front of the root in question 2 is a 4, so this time the denominator in our power has to be a 4, so we end up with a to the power of 7/4, or a to the power of 7 over 4. In number 3, the number that's in front of the root this time is a 3, so therefore we're going to end up with f to the power of 4 divided by 3, or f to the power of 4/3. The next one, we have a square root of g to the power 9. You got to remember that the square root symbol we don't normally write in the 2, but we have to remember it means it's a 2, so this one here becomes 9 divided by 2 as the indice term. Over to number 5, and this time the value that's in front of the root is a 5, therefore the fraction we're going to have this time is b to the 3/5. Question 6, number in front of the root is a 7, therefore it's going to be our denominator, giving us the value of I to the power of 4/7. K to the power of 11 is square rooted. We know that a square root here has a number 2 in front of the root normally, which we don't write, so this one here just turns into k to the power of 11 over 2. And the last one, we've got the cubic root of p to the power 8, so this one here, what we've got to do is we've got to divide the 8 by 3. So if we do that, what we're going to get is we're going to get p to the power of 8/3. Okay, now what we can do is we can look at Indice rule in reverse, because a moment ago we changed surds into indices with fractions, but what we can do is if we're given fractions as indices, what we can do is turn it back into surds. So here are some examples of doing just that. Let's say we start off with x to the half, something that we've seen before. Now we know that the denominator of that fraction is responsible for the number in front of the root sign. So what we can do is we can turn that into the squared root, or the second root, of x to the power 1. When we know that, then what we can do is we can now simplify that into the shorthand version of the square root of x, which we recognise. If we've got y to the power 3 over 2, then this one here, the denominator is 2, so that means the number that comes in front of the root has to be 2, and that leaves us with a y cubed that has to be square rooted. Now we don't write the 2 in normally, so we end up with just with the root of y cubed. So let's look at one that's not a squared root. Let's look at the a to the power of 1/3. Now once again, the bottom of our fraction, that tells us this number that goes in front of the root sign. So this time we're going to have the third root of a to the power 1, which we also call as the cubic root of a to the power 1, and that one there, when we tidy up, the power 1 just disappears to give us the cubic root of 8. So now we've got b to the power 3/5, and once again we know that the denominator, the 5, is going to be the symbol that goes in front of our root sign, so we end up with the 5th root of b cubed. That's it simplified as far as it can go. So what we can do now is let's test ourselves and see if we can undo some of these surds. Right, so what to do is pause the tape for a couple of minutes, try these, and then we'll check your answers shortly. Okay, let's look at number 1. In this one here, the denominator is a 4. So the symbol that's going to go in front of our root sign is going to be a 4. So we end up with the 4th root of x to the power 1. Now normally we don't write x to the power 1, we just leave it as an x. So we end up with the 4th root of x. Number 2, the denominator is 4 this time. So once again, that's going to become a root with a 4 at the front. But there's nothing there that can tidy up any further, and that's us now actually finished and we got our answer. You may recognise question number 3, it's one that I've seen before. The number we have in the bottom is a 5, so we expect the 5 to go in front of the root sign, and that leaves us with a b cubed altogether. Number 4, the denominator is a 3, so we must have the cubic root this time, and it's going to give us the cubic root of g to the power 7. Number 5, we have h to the power of 8/5. The 5 down the bottom is our denominator, so that's going to give us a 5 that goes in front of the root, and therefore it gives us root 5 h to the 8. Sorry. And then number 6, this one here, simply 7 that goes at the front, and we've got a g to the power of 10. And question number 7 is a peculiar one, because if we follow the rules here, we would put a 4 in front of the root and k to the power 8, but actually 8 over 4 can be simplified. We can simplify that down as a fraction to 2 over 1, and in this case here 2 over 1 is just the same as 2, so that one there, we have to be careful, that actually just becomes k squared. So not in every case do we actually have to find an answer in terms of a surd. Sometimes the fraction that we've got may simplify to give us an ordinary power and not necessarily a fractional power. However, in t, we've got to the power of 3 over 9, as we have here in question 8. When we simplify this one, it's going to give us t to the power of a third. Now we've seen something like that before. We have to remember that the denominators are 3, so we end up with a cubic root of t. Okay, so there's a few things to remember there, but in most cases it's pretty straightforward if you just follow the pattern and remember that the denominator in the fraction is partly to do with the root, and the number on the top becomes the power inside the root. Okay, hope this has been helpful, and we'll see you in the next lesson.